Yeah, these guys are the real life Lord of the Flies. These guys got stranded on an island, and for I forget how long, but they had to just like fucking stick together and survive. And guess what? There's no Piggy here, not because there was no Piggy on the boat in the first place, but because they didn't kill anybody. One of them got straight up injured, and they just set him up in like a fucking throne. Because the issue with Lord of the Flies is it carries this like notion that people are inherently evil, and the only thing that is keeping them from like clawing each other's throats out is the arm of the state, right? The only thing that's keeping people from just like utter barbarity is some sort of overarching power. There's a reason why we've been fed this propaganda over and over again. There's a reason why we've been made to read Lord of the Flies. There's a reason why this like the whole pessimistic, oh, the world is just shit thing is like bandied about, because that benefits a very specific subset of the population, right? It's the people who would wield that power. It's the people who come in the boats at the end and save the little kids, right? In the book, it's like they're on this island for like what, a week, and they start just going like full on, just like, we gotta just murder this kid. We gotta fucking do all this horrible shit, right? And like, if you only have experience with Western schooling systems that are kind of based on fucking German, whatever, blah, 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 and most of us are familiar with that, and we're familiar with how fucking awful it is and how cruel kids are to each other, but that's not an innate part of humanity. Obviously, like, you can't expect a bunch of middle schoolers to apply like a materialist reading to how their schooling system perpetuates like structures of power, and how it reproduces hierarchies, and how it causes kids to be fucking cruel and awful, right? But that is like what the schooling system is there to do. That's why grading exists. That's where like choices in like the games you play. Like this was making the rounds on Twitter a while ago, where people were looking at video of like Chinese kids playing a game with a ball. They were all stood in this big old circle. Each of them had two balls, and they were bouncing them. They did like two bounces, and then on the second bounce, they would shift over one, and they would like, the ball in their right hand would go to their left hand, and the ball in their left hand would go to the right hand of the kid next to them. And their right hand would pick up the ball that was bounced by the kid to their right. And they would go bounce, bounce, shift, bounce, bounce, shift, bounce, bounce, shift, bounce, bounce. It was really fucking tight. And like, I'm looking at that, I'm like, that sounds cool as hell. I would have loved to have played that. And all the people in the chat are just like, this is horrible. How could they do this to their children? This is what communism does to children. It's just a bunch of fucking kids bouncing a ball in a circle, right? But people are so fucking invested in the evils of a collectivist society, and how like the way their schooling was set up is the right way to go about it. That's the good way or whatever. It's completely fucking nonsensical, right? Because the reality is what a socialist society, in as much as China is like a communist society or whatever, that stands as a critique of a Western capitalist society. And for a long time, we didn't really have that, right? We had the Soviet Union, and then that collapsed, and then there was nothing, right? I'm getting off base, but the point is, kids in a capitalist society are inculcated with a certain culture, and that culture is a capitalist culture. It's a capitalist mode of social reproduction. It's a capitalist reading of the world around them. It's a capitalist way of interacting with your fellow man. So it would make sense if that's your only experience. It would make sense to expect that kids would do that, because that's the society you live in. Like you talk to people who like, you say like, hey, isn't it bad that people die because of lack of access to healthcare, or like they die from like preventable diseases? Or isn't it like fucked up that the US let 20,000 people die? Or isn't it fucked up that like we have more empty houses than we have homeless people, and it literally costs us negative money to just house every homeless person? It costs us negative money. Isn't it fucked up? And they say like, people die, not my problem, right? That's the fucking worldview they have. It's fucking like they watched 300 and they just thought like, yeah, I live in Sparta. They think they live in fucking 300 world, where it's just like horrible barbaric world where like just fucking it wouldn't be out of place for you to just get fucking gunned down in a fucking elementary school. But that's not an inherent part of humanity. So, yeah, what was I talking about? So, in real life, there was a Lord of the Flies. And it turns out when you get a bunch of kids stranded on a fucking island, what do? What's like the natural human response? At least in this case, a very natural human response is to help out the people around you because you care about each other because you're a fucking community. So, yeah, Lord of the Flies is trash. It's completely untrue, and if you like that book or you think of it as anything other than like a fucking farcical work of propaganda, I would compare it to Ender's Game, but I haven't read Ender's Game because it sounds like a gigantic waste of time. I would argue that every single book that you're made to read in school is propaganda, because the goal of schooling is reproduction of structures of power and the reproduction of social structures. And core to the social structure that we live in is this notion that the only thing that's keeping us from abject poverty and utter barbarity and living like a fucking animal, the only thing that's keeping us from living like that is capitalism, a violent hierarchical state. Those things are the only thing that are keeping us from fucking starvation. That's what the Lord of the Flies, that's the message the Lord of the Flies is trying to teach to people. And are you talking about in the Lord of the Flies? It doesn't matter who rescues the kids, because that, like, the kids getting rescued is not really the point of the book, right? It's just like a way for the book to end. The specifics of it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the force that comes to rescue them is the state. It's there to return them to civilized society. And I'm spelling civilized the Huckleberry Finn way. It's like Huckleberry Finn was like probably like the only good. Huckleberry Finn was probably the only good book I read in school. At least I read it in like high school, I think. Without the state, humans would just kill each other all the time, with the strong dominating everything. Instead of the state is the strong dominating everything. But it's kind of true, no? You gotta fucking Lord of the Flies is demonstrably not true, because we are looking at a real life example of Lord of the Flies. These guys right here were stranded on a fucking island, and they did not murder each other. You'll be happy to know. Were they friends before getting stuck, though? You know what's a great way to make friends? Having a shared experience, like getting stranded on a fucking desert island. That's a really great way to make friends real quick. Part of the reason why no one has friends is because every single social interaction we have is mediated under like, okay, well, who is making money off of this? We're severely isolated because everything we do is just work, right? We work and then we go home, we do things that we're like taught that the only way you can like go and have fun is if the way you're having fun is by making other people money. The core thing is like community. The whole job of neoliberalism and capitalism is to destroy community. They did what the adults would have done, and that's why their society failed. Okay, but the thing is, if the central premise of Lord of the Flies was that the reason why the kids fell into barbarity was because they were just mimicking the actions of their parents, I'm sorry, they would have established that in the beginning. They would have like fucking had scenes of like adults teaching their children how to like, you know, how to shoot a gun or whatever, or like just beating up on people or something like that. I'm sorry, that wasn't established. Just they were on a fucking boat, then they fucking got shipwrecked, and then they just like fucking jumped right into that. The whole premise of it is like the moment they were isolated from society, the moment they were isolated from those forces that you're arguing were making them barbaric in the first place, the moment they were isolated from those forces, that's what made them barbaric. And I'm sorry, it's like the premise of the book is the exact opposite. Like when was Lord of the Flies written? Lord of the Flies. Okay, during the Cold War. I wonder what was happening during the Cold War. I wonder if any society had like a vested interest in like banning about propaganda that would argue against collectivism, or that would argue for like some sort of like hegemonic capitalist society. I wonder if there was like some culture that would have a vested interest in doing that, right? I wonder why. No one was good. If it was propaganda as post-colonialism, it's hard to see that, but I define it as. But okay, but this is also the fucking like the whole no one is good thing. The whole like everyone's evil. But the thing is that okay, but yeah. So we're getting into the thing of human nature. I keep on getting distracted. Thank you for getting me back on track. So this whole like everybody's evil thing is very useful to the powers that be. This whole argument that everyone's evil, the world is just fucked. That's very useful for the powers that be because that obfuscates dynamics of power. Because if you actually said, if you said that like, okay, well, people are normally good, but there are these people who are fucking evil and they benefit by ruining the lives of other people. They gain monetarily and materially by fucking causing mass genocide. Like, if you actually talk about evil in the context of that, it makes it very clear. Like, okay, well, these are the evil people, right? They're the capitalist overlords. They're the fucking warmongers in the government, right? They're the fucking heads of the capitalist state, and like. When you go like, oh, well, just like people, it's just human nature to be evil. It both absolves them of any fucking culpability for their actions. It also fucking just pretends that like, oh, it's just the way of the world or whatever. It's fine, you know? Well, when we have shitheads in the chat, you want to make fun of them?